Good afternoon, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. It is our Proverbs 31 Women's Ministry Sunday afternoon podcast. My name is Sharon Stroy, the Associate Pastor for God's Kingdom Heavenly Church. And we want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon. And if you are watching this on replay, we hope you get something beneficial out of it. The Proverbs 31 Women's Ministry's vision simply is to empower women in operating in God's greatness for all areas of their lives. This conversation every month that we have is an intergenerational conversation. It's an intergenerational conversation because we want to be able to create empowering and transformative spaces and places for all women to maximize their gifts, their talents in becoming leaders, but also to become aligned with God's purpose for their lives through spiritual discernment, a strength based philosophy, and studying the Word of God. Proverbs 31's women's ministry is committed to education, evolution, and elevation for all women. This afternoon, I am so excited to be in conversation with this amazing woman. I was so fortunate to be blessed to meet her by accident, simply by working with some young people, and they shared with me the work that she's been doing as the founder and owner of Authentic Voices Global. I was fortunate to meet Lauren, who not only helped us in the Truth Racial Healing and Transformation Center National Day of Racial Healing in 2022, produced a video for the NJ STEP program at Rutgers University North, but has been a voice in this space of social justice, racial justice, solidarity, and simply humanity. So before we get started, because today's conversation is about what are we afraid of? Fear, false evidence appearing real. And so I would like for Lauren to just tell us a little bit about herself, who she is, and what has been a little bit of her journey in relationship to God. Lauren, thank you.
Good afternoon and almost good evening, depending on where you are today. Thank you so much, so much, Reverend Story, for having me on. It means a lot. It means so much to me to be on your platform, but also to have known you for the last couple of years and how you've impacted my life and made space for me to share my gifts in your community. It really means a lot. So who am I? What do I do? I think I have a really simple title, and my first title is mommy, and it's one of my greatest titles. And I have the privilege of also being able to say that I'm wife. But I think most importantly, outside of those titles, I love to embrace being an advocate for change, being a vehicle for change. And what does that look like? Merging my artistry together. One might say I'm an artivist, an activist, and an artivist. But I think I'm quite simply a person on a journey working to make this world a better and brighter place, one person at a time. So,
Awesome.
and I think the other question you asked is about faith.
Yep.
Um, I grew up in the church, but I honestly don't feel like I had my faith journey really begin until I started life on my own. So when we talk about bridging the gap between generations of women, I think what was one of the most important things to me as I was growing up and really entering into womanhood myself was having women in my life that I felt safe enough to talk to share with, and that created space for me to be my fullest, authentic self. Where I am now, I love to just simply say I am a lover of Jesus, and I'm a lover of Jesus and I'm a lover of justice. And I think you can't have justice without Jesus. And I believe that Jesus is a father for justice.
Amen. Amen. I like that. And so for the past week, this past weekend and yesterday's sermon topic, it talked about fear.
Hmm.
What are the things that we are afraid of? And the foundational scripture that we use, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And so when we talked about it yesterday, in my preparation for the sermon, you will be amazed at how many things people are afraid of. But what was also amazing was that every single thing that we're afraid of, that there was actually a phobia for.
Hmm.
There is a phobia for everything. We've talked about claustrophobia. I had a fear of water, so there's aquaphobia. And so, but what we also talked about is how fear can paralyze us. It can stop us from moving. It can stop us from living the life that God has called us to live. But I really just want to get in, engage with a conversation with you and your voice around this topic because it may be afraid, or we may have some things that we're afraid
Mhm.
of, but is it real? Is it real to us? And so, Lauren, we're going to start this conversation with a simple question. When you were a child, what were you afraid of?
That's an interesting question because I look back at little Lauren and I can see how audaciously fearless she was. And I think when you ask me the question, well, what was I afraid of a child? I don't actually remember what I was afraid of as a child because I really didn't have a lot of fear. And I think it was as I grew and the world began to teach me what I should fear and how I should move through the world that's when I began to really understand what fear is, right? Or I think about it often as a parent and how I'm like, "Oh, don't do that. You can hurt yourself. Don't do that." And what does that do? That places fear into my child because he thinks, "Well, I can do anything. Why can't I do a backflip?" Like I'm like, "Cuz you don't know how." Like that's why you can't do a backflip because you don't know. You're not in gymnastics. You don't know how to do it. But in his mind, he's saying, "I can do anything." Right? And so when I say don't, you can hurt yourself. Well, then he doesn't, when he does begin to learn, it's his mind now on, okay, I've got to learn how to do this, but I might hurt myself. Right. So I hope I answered that question, but
No, wait a minute. Not only did you answer the question, you opened it up for another question because one of the things in the definition of phobia and fear is usually something, a traumatic event that happens in our childhood. But you said you were fearless. You were pretty audacious. So was it becoming a mother that you became, I'm not going to say fear, but maybe cautious?
well, I think that as I got older, right? So when I came out of that adolescent age, I do remember a time where I was fearful. I remember when we started learning about stranger danger.
Mm.
And I remember my parents, we talked about it in school. My parents talked about it at home. And I remember one day I was riding my bike home from school and there was a truck that was coming down the same street as me. Then it turned onto the same street. And so I jumped off my bike and I started running home and I like frantically opened my house door and I locked the door and it was the grass people for the house like two doors down. But what happened was is that I was so cautious in my mind that somebody could follow you, somebody could take you. Watch your surroundings, right? So what I saw was danger, and it actually wasn't danger in that moment. But what if that's something that did create a type of anxiety in
Right.
me as a child? And I think it did, right? Um, so I think life, as you learn different things, can begin to impact you in ways that um, we might not know it's fear, but it can begin to settle into our bodies as fear.
And so, but what it also sounds like, and so part of the conversation yesterday also lifted up the fact that our brain is wired to recognize danger, to
Hmm.
recognize things that may cause us harm. So our brain is actually naturally wired to kind of, all right, there's some things going on. But as
Right.
I'm listening to you talk, it also sounds like, and it's something that didn't come up, that can be taught.
Yes. Yes. 100%. I think so. And I think also when we're talking about, and maybe I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but when we're talking about fear in terms of standing in our faith, right? I think oftentimes, especially in the church, we're going to hear things like, well, just, yeah, you're just not supposed to have a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. And you're like, okay, well, like, what does that mean to like walk with power, love, and a sound mind and to not have fear? Well, God knew we were going to have fear. I mean, think about it. Jesus walked to his death and literally was like, if you want to take this cup from me, he actually experienced human fear, right? But it didn't paralyze him from doing the job that he was called to do or placed here to do. And I think that's what he rose up in authority to walk in the power that God had already anointed him with when he placed him on this earth, right? So I think that's what that means. And it's really beginning to question ourselves and say, like, okay, well, what part of that is really real with the fabric of who I am? Because fears are real. There are fears that are rooted in trauma, that are woven into our bodies, and it takes a lot of work for us to unlearn those things and undo those things, right? And that might be work outside of the church. It probably is. It's like in therapy, and it might be through something else active, it might be through sound baths, whatever you have to do to get the trauma out the body. But then there's also the fear that we learn that the world kind of inundates us with, even on the news every day, right?
Yeah.
And and honestly, Sharon, I don't know if sometimes it feels that easy just to be like, well, I'm going to walk in just the power of God today and have a sound mind and not fear at all. Because I honestly, I sometimes have to walk up to the fear and be like, yeah, I'm really nervous right now, but I guess I got to move forward.
Wait a minute. And that's where the faith and the fear operates at the same time. And wait a minute,
Right.
and wait a minute, and wait a minute. You are answering the questions. Come on, I am all here for it. Like that is what we're. This is what this conversation is about. Because the example that was used yesterday was Abraham.
Hmm.
Abraham was made a promise from God. Look, you gonna have a son of your own seed, and here comes Isaac. All
Hmm.
right, 100 years old. Abraham waited years for the promise.
Right.
Then God said, I need you to sacrifice him.
Hmm.
Now, in the word, it said he went and did everything that he was supposed to do. But come on now, in his flesh. And
Right.
it gets to that point. The only thing that he had to hold on was that God will provide. But at the same time, he wasn't afraid.
Right.
He's getting ready to sacrifice the son that was promised to him.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the reality is what the word is saying is we have to sacrifice our flesh. Abraham wasn't afraid.
Oh, absolutely it was. And I think even if we take that in just, daily because that seems like a story that is of great magnitude, right?
Yes.
And I think most of us here might be like, well, I don't know that I've ever heard God tell me to go sacrifice my child, right?
Right.
Like, okay,
Right.
I get it. But I think as a as a woman, as a mother, as a business owner, um, I can tell you that almost every week I have these moments where I'm like, God, is this vision really as big as I think it is? Like all the things that I'm praying for that I know I've heard you promise to me, but I've also heard you say you're going to see through. Like, is it going to happen? Because sometimes what I'm seeing in my life, right? So the false evidence that's appearing real, it's not lining up with what God said. So when I'm looking at the things that are supposed to be getting me to the promise, I'm like, okay, this isn't lining up yet because I mean, I need these resources, right, to move my company forward, or that I need to make sure that I'm able to take care of my family and provide, right? And so sometimes, like those things that are basic things, when they're not lining up with the promise, well, then no wonder that is false evidence that is appearing to be real, right? It's appearing to tell me that that promise isn't going to happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it doesn't make sense.
Right? It doesn't make sense.
Wait a minute. In our natural mind,
Mhm.
it doesn't make sense. And so, because there have been days where, and here's where the reminder of the faith kicks in. Well, God, you said this. Here is where I am today.
Right.
But there's something else that you said that also, because fear creates worry and creates doubt
And anxiety.
and anxiety. Yes, it does. Like long term anxiety.
Hmm.
Is this vision really this big? Like, because there is the fear of success.
Hmm.
Just like there's the fear of failure, there's the fear of success.
Hmm.
As a woman, as a wife, as a mother, as a business owner, how did you overcome that? And have you?
I think I'm overcoming it step by step, right? So, one thing that I feel like for the last year and a half I've been praying for is a business partner, someone to help me really kind of catapult my business forward. And it's very interesting. I haven't found that person yet. And so this past April for Second Chance Awareness Month, I had a really big fundraising event here in Dallas. And I've been working on a documentary. It's called The Redemption Scholars, and it's about incarceration and education. And so I flew the Redemption Scholars here to Dallas for the event and curated the event in a really, I feel like, amazing way. But I'm giving you a little bit of the backstory
Yeah.
because what I want you to know is at the end, we had about 75 people to 100 people show up at the
Amazing.
event. We raised $8,000 in one night, which I thought was amazing. And we were raising money to aid in the completion of the documentary. And I remember at the end of the event going home, and it felt like my wedding night, where you're like, "What just happened? Who was there? Like, did I even get to try the cake? Like, I forgot what the flowers look like. I worked for months planning that with like, just I felt kind of out of body, right?" But I thought to myself, I was like, I did all of this by myself. Like, I had people who recommended vendors to me or recommended artists to perform, but I planned the event on my own. I curated what it was going to look like. I followed up with every vendor. I didn't have a party planner. I every single flyer or poster that was made for my event, I designed. And I'll send you the recap video of the event. It
Please
was
do.
phenomenal. Um, and 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 on and like even with like the posters I made, I realized like, well, that makes sense that I was able to make those posters because back in 2018, I went back to school for UX design. And I was like, why am I going back to learn UX? But I learned a skill set that I didn't know I was going to need when God called me to establish something that I was going to be doing on my own. Right?
Mm,
There was like nobody there were people that I was paying to help me,
right,
right, with certain things, but like he gave me skill sets along this journey that I felt like has been so disorganized or it's felt like it's been so long to get to where I am, and I'm constantly awaiting the moment for the grand doors to fly open, right?
right,
And it was after that event that God was like, you can stand here in this moment and know all these skill sets I've given you, but you couldn't have done it without me. Look how I set you up. And I was like, I was set up. And as my mom says, God will never give you an idea that he won't fund. So like that is one of the things that I hold on to as like I release fear and walking in my greatness because I'm like the things that I feel like I'm called to do right that I'm called to do and that I'm walking in right now, I couldn't have come up with on my best day by myself. Right. And so I think those are the things that kind of keep me solid. And then honestly, sometimes I got to also look in the mirror, put on like a little bit of like, maybe not like the best music to some people, but it's music that I have to kind of pump myself up with. Sometimes I'll put on a little Lizzo and I'll be like, yes. And I just have to like, honestly, I have to have those moments with myself because I got to remind myself, like, no, I am the dopest thing that God's ever created.
right,
I am. I'm just that bad.
right.
And on my worst day, when I feel like, you know, I don't look good or I'm not the best. No, on my worst day, what's the lyric of that song? On my worst day, I'm still a child of God, which means I am called
No matter
according to
what,
his purpose, no matter what.
no matter what. But wait a minute. You said you've been asking for a business partner.
Yeah. I and like
Wait a minute.
literally
You sound like you got one.
well, listen, right? And I think that's the thing is that I've been wanting somebody in the flesh, right? And where I am today, like it's kind of one of those things where you look at and you're like, how do you do all those things on your own? And my only answer is like, it's because God, like, honestly, it's all
No.
it's God. And
Yeah.
I'm thankful for the great setup, you know. I mean, I don't think Oprah Winfrey is amazing. And Oprah, if you're watching this, I want you to know you're amazing. But I also want you to know that there's only one Lauren Whitney. Right? Right, and because of that, right?
That's
Like, I say that in the sense of embracing the fullness and the greatness of who I am, but I also look at her and I'm like, Oprah never she I think she would say she never made it on her own,
wait a minute. I
right?
can wait a minute. So let me say that. Let me share this with you. I can attest to that is exactly how she thinks and believes. And so, Mother's Day weekend, I spent the weekend in Tennessee at the CC Winans Next Generation Live Conference. A day and a half of amazing women preaching, women from all diverse backgrounds, preaching, telling their testimony, and they live streamed in Oprah.
Mhm.
And Oprah's exact words to the question simply was, well, did you ever doubt
Yes.
that you would be successful?
Yes, she did.
Yes, she said, but what she believed based on her upbringing with her grandmother in the church, she believed I am a daughter of God.
Yes, yes. And that's why I said it that way, right? Like there is only one Oprah, which is why she's like, "No, I can't change my name. My name is my name is a part of the fabric of who I am. Lauren Whitney is a part of the fabric of who I am, but because of that, right? Like I know, like that's what I have to hold on to, right? So when the
Absolutely.
fear creeps in, that's what I hold on to. I'm like, "No, but it's got to be that good." Right? And I do think that like God gives us these sneak peeks um, whether it be in someone showing up in your life and reminding you through a word or just seeing you and the purity or who you are in that moment.
Yeah.
And I look at my son coming in my life, and he catapulted my work to a completely different level. And I tell this story often. you know I wanted to be a mother and I wanted to be a wife, but I wanted my career more.
Mm.
And I mean that in all honesty.
Yeah.
I was
Thank
like
you for
I
that.
was like, one day I'll get married and one day I'll have a kid, but I want a career more. I want to be this big actress. And I knew that I had a gift. I still have a gift, right? As and But I knew that that's what I was supposed to be doing. Well, when God is like, "Oh yeah, but here's the man," and you're like, "What? Like not today? Like we're not doing that right?" And you're like, "Oh wait a minute, but I'm in love. Okay, really? Like we're doing this right now?" And then you're like, "We're gonna get married, really? Okay, like gotta get my career go." And then you guys have a child. It was interesting because I feel like I was in a space where I was like, oh, everything's over. Like, when will I
Mm.
be now I'm a wife, I'm a mother, like, I can't chase after those things, but what God did is he gave me my son, and when he gave me my son, like, my part of me started to shatter, right? I had postpartum depression. I had to really confront a lot of the trauma I was dealing with from my parents' marriage, um, and things from, like, my youth, but as he started to break me open, he just made me see this person that created in me a love that I never knew, right? And that love for him also broke open God's heart in me for justice.
Ah.
And that's what created Authentic Voices Global. Here's the funny thing. Authentic Voices Global is a storytelling platform, and we focus on telling personal and sharing personal narratives that bring change, right? So shifting the narrative um, for social change and highlighting those stories. And right now, we're doing it through a documentary. But this is the thing: is when I doubted, oh my gosh, being a wife right now and having a child and nothing's ever going to happen. I remember thinking about a vision I had back in 2013 before I was a wife and mother. And I had this vision to start this company. And at that time, it was Authentic Voices, just Authentic Voices. And I had started working on it then. So when I thought something was dead, what God did is he said it was never dead, but I'm going to give you the deeper reason to
Mhm.
why it's needed.
Wow.
He put the root in my heart, right? Through my son. And then that's when it's like even like the work I started doing in the justice space that was really centered. I took this amazing course called Jesus and Justice, and it's all about dissecting the word of God and understanding God's heart for justice and really aligning the word. And I mean, it just was it all broke me open. I was like, "Oh," and then God was like, "Do you remember what I told you in 2013? Now's the time to do it. Now you get to carry it through."
So then you were given the vision
Mhm.
or the or
Listen,
snippet.
I was given a large part of the vision back in 2013, and
Right.
I bring that part up because, like, right now, when those moments come in and I'm
Yeah.
like, "Oh my gosh," I can think back to 2013, I'm like, "I know I'm supposed to." I remember when the vision came to me when I was living on the south side of Chicago, and he was like, "These are the stories that need to be told. Share these stories." It
And
was so
here
clear.
you now. And so let's talk about the the birth of your son and how we came together with Ask Yourself.
Mhm.
Produced this video. The first time that I watched it, I was bawling. And then sat there and watched it 5 more times in the same seating, bawling. I would like for you to share and the fear that molded, because it wasn't just fear,
Mhm.
it was like it motivated. It didn't paralyze, because that's what I took from it.
Mhm.
Share that moment, because it was like, I think the most one of the most impactful pieces of work, and I've watched it numerous times. I am still moved by it. So
Thank
I would like for you to share and tell the audience about the video, ask yourself, but that fear of motivation that it and that has created impact in whoever watches it.
Yes. So that video, I made it during the pandemic in early 2020, and I made it in response to the murder of George Floyd. And yes, it was a time of uprising for us all. I say that inclusively of it wasn't just here in the United States, it was everywhere. Um, the interesting thing is I want to name this. When the pandemic started, my friend said, I really would like you to take my course. It's called Jesus and Justice. I was like, girl, I don't have time for that. I was like, we're going to be home for a couple weeks and then I got to get back, to stuff. She asked me like 3 times. And then I finally said, fine, I'll take it. I'll take it. Well, guess what? No one was going anywhere. I'm so glad I said yes. But it was a time of equipping. And what
Mm,
happened is God began to deconstruct things in me. And he started to just even expose to me where the sight of the church is off course. And he's like, this is where like things are not right. People are not seeing my heart. People are not. And he was like, I need you to examine these things, one for yourself, right? First, examine yourself, right? And then examine like, what are you lining yourself up with? And and really the first instruction that I had is that everything needs to always line up with justice. And what does justice look like? What does it mean for things to be made right and just, right? And I can tell you one thing, when things are right and just, judgment is out of it. Our judgment is out of it. It's just out of it. So I want to name that first. So
yeah.
there was this
But no, I
equipping that
want to
was
thank you for
happening.
that.
There was
Yes.
there was equipping that was happening. So I was in this course and there was a lot of undoing, right? I was being undone. There was a lot of things that were happening there. And so when the murder of George Floyd happened, my heart broke apart like
Mm,
and this was this was a breaking that had already started happening because before I had my son, I did not want to have a boy. I wanted a girl. And when
mm.
I was told in the hospital that I was having a boy, I started crying. And as we're walking out the hospital room, my husband was like, why are you crying? We're having a healthy baby boy. I said, yes, I know, but I don't know how I'm going to protect him. And for me, it was like, I can't walk through the world pretending that I have no fear in raising a black son and that there are no fears that the world carries every day when they look at my black son, right? So when we witnessed the murder of George Floyd, I don't know any mother that could keep herself from unraveling. And the questions that I had been asking just came up. And I was talking to my friend on the phone. She's like, write it down, Lauren, write it down. And I wrote it down. And I told my friend Neelam Jeet, I said, I have to get off the phone. I have to call mothers right now. I have to make this into a video. So I don't know whoever's going to see it, but I remember hearing the whisper. This is probably one of the few times in my life where I heard this very clear whisper. And I remember hearing the whisper like, people will see it. Make it now. And I made that video in less than 48 hours. And I think within 24 hours, I had all my friends' clips back. And then I had an editor. And then we were like, oh, this needs to be edited a little tighter. So a friend recommended another editor. He's like, I'll just do it for you for free. And he was like a big editor in LA. And he like edited it to make it a little tighter. And then we posted it. And I wasn't good at social media. And it reached people. And within like, I think a day, there was over like 2 million views.
And
And
you made the news media.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and this is the thing, you don't do any of that for
Right.
to be on the news, right? But what I realized is with the news outlets and people calling me and wanting to interview, I use that moment to let's talk about like, oh, just the fear of being a Black mom. Now, I don't mean that lightly, I don't
Right.
mean that. But I wanted to talk beyond the fear of being a Black mom. Um, and really, what that video was there to do was for people to examine the stigmas and stereotypes and fears that they carry of Black men.
Yeah.
That's why it's ask yourself, when did my baby become a threat to you? And in order to do that, you have to examine your thought pattern, your thinking, the things that are woven into you that evoke fear when you see a Black or brown body.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And those things are false evidence appearing real, right? Right? Because those things are woven into our psyche through stereotypes that aren't true and
Yep.
through stigmas that aren't true.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And let me tell you how powerful that is. So, in my work with the Truth Racial Healing Transformation Center, I facilitate racial healing circles just a week ago,
Mhm.
facilitating a racial healing circle in the arts community in New Jersey. I'm so amazing to the New Jersey Theater Alliance, NJPAC, and Art Pride New Jersey to put together a symposium about um, dismantling these same stereotypes in the art community. Well, we facilitate in person racial healing circle. The man had to be in his 50s, at least 6'2", maybe 300 pounds. Big man. He literally said he's afraid to walk out his door. So imagine being Black and male and the fears of society to where you are afraid to walk out your door. But what was interesting, and so I'm going to ask you, what was interesting that he said was, I am just so amazed at how women don't operate in fear. I just see them out here. They're just doing what they need to do. And, I'm just in awe. But as a Black man, I'm afraid to walk out my door. I do it because I have to, but I'm afraid.
Mm.
What's the difference? This perception, and especially for Black women, that we're fearless. Is that real?
No.
If
No.
explain the false evidence there,
Well,
Lauren.
you know what? All right. Well, listen, ladies, I'm just going to keep it real with you. I think part of the issue is, right? Here's one day someone said on Facebook, one of my friends, she wrote, I am tired of always being strong and resilient. She
Thank
said,
you.
because for one to be resilient, that means that they have to endure hurt and pain. The Black woman is always labeled as resilient and strong and powerful, and tough, right? But it's because we're always enduring something on our back. We're always carrying something on our back. And the stigma and the stereotype is that we can handle it. We can hold it. We can do it all. No, you can't. I don't want to do it all. Like, let me relax. Like, no, I don't want to do it all. And in fact, I don't want to be oh so resilient. I serve a father who is resilience. Why do I have to be the one that has to be so resilient? But I think the stigma that we have carried and we as women have, Black women have passed along to one another is you are strong. You are resilient. You can go through anything. So we almost are telling each other that we have to go through these things, right? And yes, life can be hard. Life will be hard, right? Those are truths. Life will bring you some hardships. But there's a there's a beauty when we understand, like, well, strength actually means weakness. Strength actually can mean that we are weak in our Father's arms, right? Because when we are weak, He is strong. And what does it mean to lean more into that than to having to be the woman who is always carrying strength, right? And acting like nothing's wrong, or actually not acting like it. We have conditioned ourselves to believe that nothing is wrong with the weight that we carry. And I don't know how this relates necessarily to, I mean, I think where I'm going with this is
Yes.
that those things are false evidences that are appearing real, right? I don't know that we would label them as like fear, but they're or maybe it's fear of what happens if I drop it all? What happens if I can't carry it all? I've been made to tell myself that I have to, right? Like I, I, I was speaking with a woman the other day, and I love marriage and I love what God has created in marriage. But she said something that was quite profound. She was like, I I love my partner. She was like, but sometimes I don't want to be the carrier and holder of his emotions. And she was like, and I want to love him at his apartment, just and let him stay there. I love him there. And she was like, and that's why I don't know that I need to get married right now. I respected that so deeply, because what she was valuing is that as a Black woman, she can no longer carry everybody else's load.
Yep.
Right. And so I don't know. I don't think fear is just like afraid to step out or to do something. I think fear can be the things that we carry every day that we've been conditioned to do that are false evidence appearing real, that are literally are just weighing on us and keep us from being in our truest, most authentic self, or free from the emotional luggage, or free from walking in our fullest capacity into our callings, right?
Absolutely.
Because we're busy carrying things that we've been told we have to carry.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the first sermons that I ever preached, I mentioned, I said, and this was years ago, this fallacy of strong, independent Black woman and that I'm superwoman. No, that is not real. I gave that cape up. I threw it away a long time ago. I am very appreciative of the Black man that I am married to because I don't have to be that,
Hmm.
because it is a fallacy. And so, to your point, the flip side of it is when the world and their fear and the stigmatism that creates fear in people exhibit bad behavior, what we do as Black women, we tolerate it or endure it because, well, I don't want to be called the angry Black woman. But that means you're justified in the behavior of how you're treating me.
Hmm.
That's false evidence appearing real.
Hmm.
Because if your behavior dictates that I am being offended or mistreated, I have a reason to be
Right.
angry.
Right.
I have a reason to be annoyed, and I have a reason to call it out. But you will be amazed at how many women, especially Black women, well, I don't want to be perceived as the angry Black woman. False evidence
Yeah.
appearing real. Let me ask you a question, and you definitely have gotten into this space. The opposite of fear is faith. When do you lean into your faith to combat the fear?
I mean, I think you got to lean into it every day. I don't know. I don't know. I'm learning, like, to try to be less reactive. And I say that in the sense of not getting to a place where the fear overtakes me and then I have to react to get myself out of whatever rut I'm in, but trying to acknowledge as things come up for me, So moving, not trying to get out of it, but moving through it, right? So acknowledging what I'm feeling. And that's a faith thing, right? Is trusting that one, my feelings are real, right? They may not be justified with good reason, right? Like, oh, my company's never gonna launch. Are you kidding me? 100 people just showed you how much they believe in you. Are you kidding me? You made a video in 2 days and 1 million people watched it. Are you kidding me? You know what I mean? God will open up the stage of the nations for you to share. He's doing it right now. Get ready, Lauren. Get ready to walk on them, right? So it's those moments that sometimes I have to even prophetically speak to myself. Like in that moment, I needed that right then. What I just said, I needed to remind myself, no, you are called to the nations, right?
Yes.
Um, but I think the faith is like it's a daily, it's a practice. It's a daily practice. It's oh, man, you know what? And it is so easy to like live in that place of like fear and then get comfortable in it. Cause I was comfortable in it for a while where I was like, well, you know what? It's easier just to stay here than to like not, than to like, you know,
Get up and
become,
do something.
yeah, or just become really great, right? And fabulous that you know you're supposed to be. But I mean, or you could just like, just kind of lean into this like mediocre life. And honestly, that complacency can feel really good because change is uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then honestly, sometimes it's uncomfortable. Oh, this is a word. Sometimes as you move out of fear, certain people aren't ready to join you on that journey. So you're
Amen.
gonna lose people on the way.
Amen.
People that you think like, oh, you're supposed to like, no, because they're not ready to walk in that level of freedom. They and not even just level of freedom, because on the journey you might not find that freedom instantaneously, right? But it when you have the audacity just to face yourself every day, because that's part of the journey of faith, is to face yourself and say, well, what needs to go? What's not working? What can change? What's holding me down? And not everybody is ready to do that. And that's actually okay. That's okay. That's not something to frown on the people around you about at all. And I think, yeah, I think that's what that journey of faith looks like for me. And it might not sound so cut and dry.
Mm.
Um, One thing that helps me that I love is I started about 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I make a playlist at the beginning of the year, maybe every other quarter. It just depends on what's happening. But I'll
Right.
make a playlist with some worship songs that really help usher me in my year or that I feel like I need. And like what my first year, I made the playlist. This song called New Wine
Mhm.
was on my playlist, and it was the lyrics are through the crushing and through the pressing. God is making new wine. And it felt like I was in a season of crushing and pressing, but I needed that song because I was like, it's for a purpose. And I really love to drink wine. I don't really drink wine as much anymore just because I don't like red wine like I used to as much. But I used to love to drink red wine. And so I was like, oh, well, this makes sense because you don't just get to go get grapes and bring them home and crush them and then drink the wine, right? It goes through a process. And like the really, really good wine goes through a really long process or it goes through a very specific process.
Yeah.
And the grapes are hand picked, right? And so it was a season where it was like hand picking and pressing and uncomfortable and really painful and all that stuff. And then
Yeah.
this year, like, this is my breakthrough album, right? And so there's a lot of songs about breakthrough and um there's like worship songs on there, but then I got me a Lizzo song on there because I'm like, I gotta also be able to hear that song and be like, hey girl, because you bad, right? Like, and like, because I need that. I just, that's
Right.
what I need. And
Right.
so that's part of like for me, the faith. And I'll say the last thing is, and I had somebody say this to me recently, and I have not activated it. And I told myself I'm going to activate it tomorrow. Everybody has different limitations in the way that they can move. And I acknowledge that we all move differently and beautifully.
Right.
But she was telling me, Lauren, it's time for you to get, back active in your body, get into a workout class. I was like, I know, I need to get into a workout class. So we came to the conclusion Pilates would be really great for me. So I'm signing up for Pilates tomorrow. So if you go on my social media, please feel free to just send a message and say, girl, did you start that
Did you
Pilates?
sign up for your
And
Pilates?
and if I don't answer, then you know that I didn't start it. And then, yeah, sure, you can you can be accountable. But I'm going to start this Pilates
Absolutely.
tomorrow. But what she said that was so powerful, she said, when you move your body, you change your mind. When you move your body, you change your mind. And so I said, well, I'm going to actively be very intentional about moving my body more. And I don't know about you, since the
No.
pandemic, I've been a lot more sedentary, even just working, right? I'm sitting on a couch right now with my computer in my lap. I work like this often, and my body's feeling the effects of it.
Yep.
And if my body's feeling the effects of it, then that means that it might try to translate like that to my mind, right?
Yep.
And so, but because my mind is right now in a place of like, nope, we getting ready to go. We got stuff going on. I'm like, well, listen, the body and they need to get on one accord right now, which means, which means the things that,
that you put in the body.
yes, and the tension that like even in this moment I feel in my shoulder and that I feel going down my leg sometimes make me feel um I'm worried about them, right? Where I'm like, "Oh, my leg." But I I think it's actually just quite simple, right? Like,
You're not moving.
don't fear. I'm not moving.
You're not moving.
You're
Don't
not
feed into the
moving.
fear.
Yeah, like, right. Don't worry about it and feed fear. You're just not moving.
Right.
And part of it is your body like probably has so much energy because your mind is ready to go. Like it's your time to blast off. It's time. It is you. It's go season. So you gotta move the body. Sometimes you, and this is the other thing. Sometimes you just gotta
Wait a
speak
minute.
things
Let me
out
tell you
loud, and then you
something.
start giving yourself a word.
Right, wait a minute, because Lauren, that is exactly what the word was yesterday. Because the wait a minute, because fear impacts the mind, the body, the
Mm-hmm.
soul, and the spirit, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what that is actually what that foundational scripture is about. Because you know, our mind is our thought, our intellect. Our body is our physical being.
Mm-hmm.
They all operate together. Our soul is our emotions. And then our spirit is our heart where God dwells.
Yes.
So that's our connection. And so if we allow fear to clog up the vessel, we then lose the connection to God.
Mm-hmm.
But when you said what the woman said to you resonated with me so much because, to be honest with you, all transparency, I met God walking in the park every morning.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can hear him audible. Like I met God because I was walking.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, because of this pandemic, the body's doing something else. But now, even for me, broke my toe a couple of months ago, still has not fully healed. So what have I not been doing?
Right.
Not walking.
Mm-hmm.
So my movement that works best from my mind, body, and soul is walking because we are spirit first, having a human experience. And man, that was so like that resonated with me so much because if we don't take care of all of our authentic self, then what are we allowing into our mind?
Mm-hmm.
What are we allowing to fester?
Right.
Does that spirit of fear take root in our hearts, in our emotions, in our mind, which then generates actions and behavior. One of the biggest issues with racism, discrimination, is fear and poor communication, because the fear drives the ignorance. The ignorance becomes violence
Mm. Yes. Yes.
because it's grounded in fear.
Yes. You know what I say with an authentic voices global. One thing that I say is I say one story has the power to change a nation. One story has the power to shift perspectives. One story has the power to change systems. And
Yeah.
and I say that because I think that there is power in personal story. And when we take the time to get to know somebody, to hear somebody's story of why, right? I guarantee you that the most authentic form of all of us that are walking this earth, these humans, right, is that there's a heart in us, right? And no, I've never heard of like, oh my gosh, this baby came out so violent. This baby was 3 minutes old and was just violent and tried to choke people and hurt people. No, every baby came out ready to be loved. Every baby came out looking for a warm place to go, right? And so I believe that these stories can impact, because I believe that change happens when hearts and souls do the listening. And so that's what we're making. We are creating, I'm not making stories. I'm creating space and foundations for stories to be told, and in a way that impacts hearts and souls.
Awesome. That's
Um,
amazing.
and so when you talk about, the racism and discrimination and them being rooted in things that aren't real, they're not real. But how often are we taking the time to get to know the real truth of who someone is?
We're not.
We're not. And how often are we also really given the opportunities?
We're not.
We're not.
Because these systems are not made up for that.
No. You know what? This can sound crazy, but
No,
I
go.
have such compassion for the man who's now 60 years old that was raised in a KKK community. That's all he knew. So he was walking in something that was just what was taught to him, right? And that was what someone else knew. I'm not saying these things are right. And I'm
Right.
intentionally giving something that feels incredibly um destructive, even in saying it out of my mouth, right? Where it feels like, why would you ever say compassion? Because the truth is what happened to him? Do
That's
we
it.
sit in that place of wonder to be like, how did, do you ever wonder how he was treated by his mommy and daddy? Was he loved on? What happened?
I tell the story. I've had, when I'm in predominantly spaces, white spaces that are predominantly attended by people who have been racialized as white. And I've said to them, the institution and the cruelty of slavery and Jim Crow and all of that has impacted you as well. And
Mhm.
one person said, no, I do recognize my privilege and understand, that I've benefited from this. I said, no, you still were impacted as well. And she didn't understand what I meant. I said, so let me give you an example of a story. You're 8 years old. You do what your parents tell you to do. Your parents decide to take you to a lynching of a person of a black body. At 8, your humanity
Mhm.
for that body is gone because the systems in society said that that was okay.
Mhm.
You're 8. You do what your parents tell you to do. You go where they went, and this is what you were taught. So now you're 8, your brain is developing, it gets reinforced by the narrative of society and what your parents say and what society says is okay, and you grow up with this.
Mm-hmm.
You may not even realize that you don't see me as a human being
Right.
because all you see is my black body.
Mm-hmm.
And so it allowed me to lean in exactly to what you're saying. What's your story?
What's your story?
What happened to you? Why do you feel this way? Have you been exposed to anything else? Or simply, what are you afraid of?
Mm-hmm.
So, as this was the quickest hour, Lauren. I didn't even realize that we were at time. But I have one more question that I always ask all of the amazing young women that I get to listen to and share with, as this is an intergenerational conversation. What advice would you give to your peers, the individuals younger than you, and the individuals older than you that wanted to start something new and was afraid?
I would say this: own your story, own your story, and own your narrative, and then look over your journey thus far. And there will be nuggets of truth and evidence that will back up the vision that's already been given to you.
For all of them.
For all of them, I truly believe that
So,
um, that's just how faithful God is, right? And even looking back, like I can look back at the 6-year-old who got the Ariel or the Little Mermaid tape for my birthday, and I sat there and I watched it on repeat. And, it was a video cassette, so you had to keep taking out, rewind, put it in the thing to rewind it,
right.
and I watched it over and over again. But I remember thinking, like, why can't Ariel look like me? Now I'm not playing Ariel, right? But Ariel sure does look like me now, or a version of me, right? Um, but I also look back and I'm like, that was a girl who loved music and um loved performing. And I was 6, and I look at that right now and I'm like, I still love music, I still love performing, but I also see like my son who's just, I mean, he thinks Halle Bailey is the most gorgeous thing he's ever seen. And it's actually quite funny. He's 6. He's 6. Oh my gosh, I was 6.
There you
I
go.
just see, I
There-
told you there will always be evidence. My son is 6 and this
Six.
movie's coming out. I was 6 when it came out. Like that's kind of magical, right? And that's evidence that I'm on the right path.
There you go.
It's and it might be nuggets that feel like that, or there might be nuggets that are even more true. But I dare you, I dare you to fully embrace your story and embrace it with, here's the key, embrace it without shame.
Ah, explain.
There are pieces of your story, or there may be in life pieces of your story that one might tell you to leave out and that you don't need to ever talk about, or you don't need to include it in who you are. You need to release it. And there are things that we go through, right, that we want to just kind of dust off and move through. But I don't think that God allows us to go through what we go through for just no reason. And I say embrace your story and embrace it with no shame, because there's so much freedom when we can take our story and own it, or we can work through the trauma and then allow it to not hold us, right, anymore. But that also takes us saying, like, I'm not, there's no shame in this. This is what I went through. This is where I've gone. This is where I've been. Um, and one day I'll share my story more, because I have one that there are parts of my stories that people were like, don't ever share that. Mm-mm-mm. And in fact, when I share it, they might be like, oh, I can't believe she shared that. And I'm gonna be like, oh my gosh, thank you. I finally shared that because I have so much freedom in it. And in
Yeah.
fact, when I talk about it, even openly, sometimes people are like, oh, okay. But it's like, I serve a God who loves me and who made room for me. And I think when we embrace our narrative and our stories, like our story might be the very freedom that someone else is looking for. So I don't there's no like direct formula I have in getting to the things that you're called to do or the thing that you want to start or do. But I think it really is as simple as begin with yourself and first embrace who you are
Love.
without an ounce of shame. And then just be gracious with yourself every day. Give yourself an opportunity to start over and start anew every day.
Because it starts with us.
Yes,
God, wait a minute.
it
For
starts.
God so loved the world
Mm-hmm,
that he sent his only begotten son.
mm-hmm.
He loved us,
Yeah.
which means he loved us even in those moments when we couldn't love ourselves. And
Yes.
you, Lauren, you're absolutely correct. Because there are some stories that I shared that were traumatic, they were painful. But what I've also realized, okay, God was there, created an escape, but that same painful, traumatic event that I have no problem talking about has helped numerous people
Mm-hmm.
because they were living in that shame thinking it was just them. No, I've
Right.
been through that. Let me tell you what happened. And
Mm-hmm.
they're looking at me like, well, how did you get so comfortable talking about it? Well,
Right.
first let's talk about it. It took me 20 years before I even opened my mouth about it.
Right. And I mean, and that's the other thing is like the part of the giving the grace is like knowing that you might not get to that place of freedom in your story tomorrow.
No.
And that's okay. But you have to be kind and gentle with yourself to go through the journey,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So go through the journey. And yeah,
Tell
yeah.
your story.
And I think the last thing I would say, and we can end with this. The last thing, there's a great book out there called that I was reading. It was a prayer book called Draw the Circle. And there's a chapter in there. He says, we're always waiting to start something. And we're like, God, help me get ready, prepare me, for what you've called me to do. Da, da, da. And he's like, God's not saying get ready. What God is saying is go, set, ready. He's asking you to move on faith, right? So go. He gave you directions, go. He's going to set you up as have already moved in faith. And by the time you arrive, you're going to be so ready. But we're spending so much time trying to ready that we haven't gone yet. And I think moving in this season and these things where I just was like, all right, Dad, I got to start this company. I need you to help me, like, formulate my corporation. He's like, really? It's kind of backwards. Like, you're not like making. I said, that's what God told me to do. I need to start it. So I started it. Everything felt backwards. And professionals told me it was backwards. But wait to like literally like, oh, my father who's an attorney. Well, usually people don't go this far in starting the corporation until they maybe brought in like this kind of money, da da da. And I got what he was saying. It actually made perfect sense. But in my spirit, it didn't make sense because I was like, that's not what I was told to do. I was told to make it now. Right. And so where things look backwards, watch how they line right on up.
Amen.
So
Last
go,
thing,
set, ready.
go set ready. Last thing, what is up next for Authentic Voices Global? I want to give you space to talk about what is the things you're working on right now, what's coming up next, what we should be looking for, and how can we support the production of this amazing documentary.
Yes. So if you would like to support the production of Redemption Scholars, our documentary, you can go right on our website, which is authenticvoicesglobal.com. And there are opportunities for you to make, I think it says join the movement, and then it will take you to another page. And We are supported by 501(c)(3. We're fiscally sponsored by the Creative Vision Foundation. And that's really exciting to have that fiscal sponsorship because we are 100% tax deductible. So any donations that come in, you can get a tax, you can get a tax donation right off. So I would definitely say go on our website and you can donate through there and support us. As we're still raising money, we're applying for grants, all types of great things. So that's the current like big project we're working on. But we also have officially launched our Epic Giant series. And our Epic Giant series is really just highlighting everyday people in our communities that are bringing change no matter how big or small. And one of our focuses is that we really want to highlight the importance of one person creating impact and one person doing something that we consider epic, right? The mommy or the grandmother who lives in the neighborhood who might help take care of 2 or 3 kids after school, she's an epic giant. She's creating change, right? And we want to normalize everyday stories. And we
Yes,
want to call attention to the everyday stories have the ability to impact. And we that way we can begin to live our lives that way. That
yes,
today I can be revolutionary today. Today I can do a revolutionary act that impacts people in a really amazing positive way.
love
So
it.
I encourage you to go on our website, authenticvoicesglobal.com, and then go to share your story. You can self submit yourself to be an epic giant, or you can submit someone else to be an epic giant. So that's our new initiative that we've launched. And eventually we will start doing, we'll highlight all those who apply, and then we will end up doing a selection where we highlight one epic giant of the month. And then I'll be interviewing them and do a small little like docu series on them.
Absolutely amazing, amazing, amazing. Lauren, thank you. Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
know, it is, all I can say is to God be the glory. Because God, I'm always intentional about when He sends just a life force into my life on my journey, on my road. But for me, at this stage in my career, as someone that is knocking on the door of 60, I am intentional about creating spaces and places of these amazing women that are coming behind me. And so
Mm.
I am just honored to have you join Proverbs 31 Women's Ministry, a ministry of God's Kingdom Heavenly Church, an online non denominational ministry about teaching the Word of God. But teaching the Word of God to where it applies to our everyday life. And thank you, thank you, thank you. Good luck. And you know,
Thank
I will
you.
always continue to support everything that you're doing because I am a straight fan. Just for
Thank you. Oh, thank you. It was so good. Thank you for having me on, and I appreciate you sharing this space with me.
Awesome. For those who are joining us, follow us on Facebook, YouTube, all of the social media, God's Kingdom Heavenly Choice, God's Kingdom Heavenly Church, Voices in the Wilderness. Have a great evening. Goodbye, everyone.